Great. So, Lou, let's get going. What do you say?
Sure.
Let's do it. Hey, folks, thanks so much for coming today. People will be rolling in, and that's fine. We'll get started here. Very excited for this talk. This whole idea started when Lou and I were having a conversation about an onsite he attended. I think it was with Ramp, right, Lou?
That's
You
right. Yeah.
said so many people ask me, like, how do you make this leap from sales to CEO? Basically, what you did, Lou, and clearly, we had 130 people sign up for this RSVP. Or for this event. It's a question on a lot of people's minds. I'm really excited for you to talk through your journey, Lou, and um, how you made that transition, and advice for folks in the sales organization if they are interested in moving up. My name is Ben Patano. I'm a founder of Dan Gravity Media, helped Lou and Patricia launch their new book, Unlikely Entrepreneurs. And for today, couple things. First, feel free to continue using the chat feature if something really resonates with you. Drop a message in there. Specifically, if you have questions for Lou, we're going to do about 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. Use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. It'll just help me keep track of all the questions. Otherwise, they'll get lost in the chat. Lastly, before we get started, we just have a short one question poll for you. We just want to know your current role, your current level. So you'll see the poll pop up on your screen right now. If you are open to it, just let us know like where you're at today. This will help Lou kind of gauge the room and give some more catered advice for folks at every level. Awesome, awesome. So we have some VP, head of sales. We have a CRO. We do have a CEO in here. You've already made it.
Who's the CEO?
I don't know. Several AEs, BDR level, the ICs, several managers and directors. Awesome. Several others as well as
I see John
product
House is
marketing.
CRO.
Okay, Alicia works in product marketing, working closely with sales, of course.
John Howe from CRO of Wasabi. Great company. Great to see
Well,
John again.
yes. Hey, Trish.
And Trish
Trish,
Favreau, yeah, my co-author. We're going to be
yeah.
talking about the book a little later on.
Yep. Jeff says hi too. Oh, outlier from the legal world, says Mark. Looking forward to hearing about your journey.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, this is great. So feel free to keep answering these questions. Lou, I'm going to hand it off to you, and let's talk about making the journey from sales to CEO.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for organizing this. And thanks, Trish, for joining. It's so fun to see people from all backgrounds here, from my lifetime. So I see some people from Trinity College, from Avid, from Turbonomic, from Black Duck, Wasabi. See some of the sales coaches, co-author, just great. So we got a lot of these questions recently on this book tour. How do you make the jump, and what are some of the things that you need to think about? So we thought we'd spend a few minutes think about how you might make the leap. How do you do this? I'll just share my experience. It's just one example, and you may be able to learn from it. You may not, but so I started my journey back when I was at Trinity College. My financial aid got cut between my freshman and sophomore year, so I needed to come up with a way to make some money. So I started selling books door to door, and I was actually pretty good at it. I sold these encyclopedias and study guides, and actually won a camera and a top first year salesperson award. So I was like, wow, I sort of really understood the relationship between 100% commission job of like the value of just work, 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 and success. Like it's just like you just have to work. And if you have a decent product, or even if you don't have a good product, I've learned that over the time, you can still sell stuff that actually doesn't exist. But the relationship between work and success is real. And I threw this in just because in my junior year at Trinity, I was over at the London School of Economics, and I got a job at a baked potato restaurant, and that's me walking around in a 60-pound fiberglass potato. And that's a Trinity classmate, John Molnar, who is helping me out. This is more of a marketing job than a sales job, but still, we're trying to sell potatoes. I then went into tech after business school, and the first startup was Avid, which was a really explosive growth company. Amazing experience. Once I had been in a startup that grew like that, I was never going back to big companies. I mean, some companies I was at got acquired by big companies, or we grew into big companies, but I never joined a big company because I just had so much fun with Avid. And I wanted to park on this for just a moment because I had the opportunity here to run what's the closest thing to being a CEO in a sales environment. I was running the Asia Pacific region. I moved to Japan and opened the office and opened the subsidiaries around Asia. And it was basically you had everything except product. You had to run finance, you had to run marketing, so you had to run other functions in addition to selling. So being a field operations person is, I think, the closest non-CEO role, but it gives you sort of a taste of what being a CEO is all about. I then came back to the States and joined some ex-Avid people at Webline, which we sold to Cisco. Then I joined another company called Fairmarket, not to be confused with the one I'm currently on the board of, which we sold to eBay. So I then made the jump to CEO. I'm going to get back to that in a minute. And the ones that I ran were Reflectant Software, Turbonomic, and Black Duck. And in between these stints, I spent some time at two VCs, Highland Capital after Webline and General Catalyst after Black Duck. And I think what's the important thing here as you're thinking about becoming a CEO is to get as many perspectives outside of your role as a salesperson as possible, because it's very easy. Sales is so hard that it's easy to focus on just being good at that, and it's hard enough to just be good at that role. But I think what you're looking for is perspective on how a whole company works, whether it's the product team. In the case of these VCs, you got to look at different companies, different technologies. The most important thing is how good is the team. That's what VCs look at, is how good is the team or the CEO at building a team. Because ultimately, that's your job as a CEO, is to build a team. That is the job. Most people still think it's not. That is the job. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But the stints at VC helped me partly because it convinced me I didn't want to be a VC. Not that there's anything wrong with being a VC, and I am an investor, but I didn't want to do that for a living because it was just I think people are either really good operators or really good investors. I've never met a single person in my life, and I don't think there is one, that's both excellent or outstanding at investing as well as an operator. They're different skill sets. They're different ways of looking at the world. Anyway, that was very helpful for me. And what I noticed over the years was that sales was so important, but it wasn't being taught in business school. So I had the opportunity while I was still at Citrix, after having sold Reflectant Citrix, to teach at Sloan. And then I took over that class. And then what happened was it was a very popular class on sales. And the Harvard students started cross-registering into MIT. So Harvard called and said, would you teach here? So I taught at both places for a little while, and then made the jump here about 10 years ago full-time to teach here. And now we have a whole sales curriculum. There's 5 separate sales classes. A lot of business schools don't even teach it, but we have 5 here because there's so many different contexts. We have founder selling and overviewer sales coaches in that class, and we have scaling your sales org, you're building a sales playbook, you have B2B sales and distribution, which is a large company, sales management issues. So I've spent some time there and spent a lot of my time doing that now. So let's just transition to this topic of CEOs who started in sales. You know these people, Ben Hoff, Howard Schultz, Sarah Blakely. They got their start there. But it's still not the most common path to get to the CEO role. And only 25% of CEOs start in sales. It's even lower in Fortune 500 companies. These are the sources from this. I've done a fair bit of work with a former professor here, Frank Cespedes, on this topic. And it's always interested me, why are so few people, especially in Fortune 500 companies, not starting in sales? Well, part of it is this thing I was mentioned before, that the leap is hard because you need to understand how the full organization works, not just the sales organization. The other thing I've seen and this is, I would say this myself is something I struggle with, was you get used to making a lot of money in sales if you're good at it. Everybody here is good at it. And you got to make a conscious decision to make less, to take a step down. You're going to make less in current income, and you're going to make more of a bet on the equity value. That's really your job, is to build the equity value of the company. Yes, you have to make your revenue numbers. That's part of it. So you have to do what you're doing before and then some. And then a lot of sales-oriented CEOs, myself included, have a hard time delegating the sales function. You think you know it well enough, you kind of want to do it yourself, you love sales. I was fortunate, especially in my last company at Black Duck, to hire someone who's just clearly better at sales than I was, Adam Clay. And I really learned, like, wow, just let somebody do it better than you. He's just better. And that's part of your job as a CEO, is to just hire a team and delegate and get out of the way of really great people. The other thing that is very common is that salespeople are often not seen as technical enough to lead a tech company. Here's the example you see all the time of, Ballmer. So it started with Gates, the founder, the technical person, moved to Ballmer, company struggles, bring back Satya, completely transform that business, and a product-oriented guy. So this is one of the common themes that I think people find when you're trying to make this jump. And I think it's actually a misconception. This misconception that you have to have a product background, you have to know VC, you have to have an MBA. I don't believe any of that. I think you can be a great CEO without it, but there's a couple of things you have to really focus on in your career to get to the next level. And let's so talk a little bit about how to make the leap. I think you need to know how to translate, what you've done into the CEO role, because sales actually is a fantastic foundation for becoming a CEO. You are, by definition, the company's chief salesperson as CEO. No matter what company you're talking about, you are the chief salesperson. You have to sell, obviously, to customers and partners, to investors. You have to tell the finance story, to your employees to motivate them to join and stay and enjoy your company. And then the thing that is really valuable here is, to me, it all comes down to people, like how to work with people. The more experience you can get managing different kinds of people, the more likely you are to be able to move into the CEO role. I guess the other thing I say, and I teach this in the courses here, is like, if you want to be a founder, and it's very popular now to be a founder, and sales is always misunderstood, you need to learn how to sell. But if you want to sell your company for a premium, you got to be really good at it, because that's even harder. Selling your product, as you know, is hard enough. Selling your company is a lot harder. I'm going through this with a few of the CEOs I work with now, and I say it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It is the hardest thing. And that's just the way. So you really, it's a great foundation. So I see product-oriented CEOs or marketing-oriented CEOs or finance-oriented CEOs really getting stuck on this, understanding how you're gonna sell your company. So let's just talk about what you should think about practically to do this. Well, you have to sort of move out to move up. You got to get out of what you're doing. You got to get out of your comfort zone. You have to think of discomfort as a feature, not a bug. Getting uncomfortable is part of the move. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can move from sales to general management. In my case, I did this when I sold Reflectant to Citrix and became a product group general manager, which was a great job until it wasn't. One of the things I didn't like was I had to share the sales team. So I had a product group of like 13 products, and it was like in all big companies, a shared sales team. I didn't have my own sales team. And after a few years, I just got fed up with it. I wanted more control of sales, which is why I went back to being a CEO again. But that general management piece is, think of it this way. Think of it as your time to hone the things you're not as strong at to get better at. For me, it was product, technology, making sure I understood kind of return on investment on product. And it was a really good experience. And I became a better CEO because I had that experience. You can move from sales to CSM. I mean, one of the things that you need to understand as a CEO is really how your customers view you. And you can learn a ton by running the customer success function or customer support function. I did this at Avid when our wait times, this is amazing, Khalid, you'll probably remember this. The wait times for our customer support at Avid got to be an hour long, and our competitor, all they do is they'd start their demo when they were pitching a new prospect. They'd call Avid and just get put on hold for an hour. That's how they sold against them. So we were losing a lot, and I had to figure out how to break up the teams and solve the problems, because it wasn't just a technical support problem, it was a people management problem. You can go to sales from marketing. There's a lot of very successful CEOs that have done this. Mark Templeton from Citrix is the best, in my opinion, a marketing guy, a brilliant marketing guy, and a really good CEO at Citrix. And then, of course, you spend some time in product, and you have to understand product well enough to go toe-to-toe with your product managers, your product marketers, and your engineers, you have to convince them that you understand what they're doing well enough so that you're not just saying, hey, I can make this sale with another feature. And so that means what you're doing in all of this is proving to senior management and the board that you're more than just good at sales, that you can manage a large and diverse group of people, understand them, and then also have empathy for how hard their jobs are. I think there's a tendency, I know I had it when I was early on in sales, especially in startups when the products were, either didn't exist or caught fire, like in the case of Avid, or really were not sturdy. They were very kind of wet paint. I felt this so hard to sell, I didn't really respect how hard it was to build a product that really worked reliably. And I think you need to convince the technical people that you do understand that. And then what it becomes about, it's all about managing people, recruiting, managing, and inspiring people in the team. So the thing here is, prove you can manage a lot of people. In most tech companies, there's two big organizations. There's sales and there's product. And, you need to be able to run both of those, or at least to have the respect of both of those organizations. I would say it's really helpful to work on your speaking skills and your general communication skills, your writing skills. As we teach in our class here, focus on active listening so you don't, from the person receiving your information, they feel like you're not just pitching them. Sales is not pitching, it's about active listening and understanding the person you're talking to's perspective. And then again, I thought this was probably the biggest learning I had to do, is understand how hard non-sales jobs are, whether it's customer success, finance, especially product, how hard it is to build products. So a couple other things here. I thought I would give an analogy here, and then we can talk a little bit about some inspiring examples of people that have become great CEOs that Trish and I wrote about. But I think it's about embracing the challenge. And to me, as you know, I'm a hockey guy. I'm an athlete. One of the people we profile in the book is Mark Fusco, who's a friend of mine. He was a board member at Black Duck. You can take any team sport or any team-oriented activity and apply it to this notion of the CEO. Why do I pick hockey? Well, first of all, you have to have multiple skills just to play. You have to learn how to skate to play. You have to, the game moves fast, and as a CEO, the market moves fast. Think about this. My son Clark is working in an AI startup, and I thought about when I was in my first startup how fast the market moved, but you might have had a quarter or a month to respond to competition. He uses a Twitter feed to see how fast the market's moving in AI startups. It's moving fast, just like hockey. And so what does that mean? When you get the puck, you better know what the hell to do with it. Because if you don't, you're going to get stuck, and someone's going to legally crush you in the boards, and they can really hurt you. And I think of it, you have to know what's coming and where it's going. That's your job as a CEO, is to think about all these multiple activities in the market: product, people, pricing, financing. You have to think about all those different things, and you need to know what you're going to do when you get the puck. That's what good CEOs actually know what to do, how to handle situations, and so it's really, as I said before, all about the people. Now, you're not going to know how to do this yourself the first time. I didn't. So you need a mentor who can help you and coach you with what your weaknesses are. I had mentors for finance. I had them for product. I had them for where I was weak. And there's other things you can do to get this perspective, which is what I think you need to sort of understand the role of the CEO. Become an advisor or a board member. Advise a startup, because you have a skill. You can advise them on how to sell or go-to-market strategy, or different options for how to sell your product. You can work with venture firms that are always interested in working with salespeople who see the market, see leads out there. Develop relationships with investors so they might think of you the next time an opportunity for a CEO comes up. That's a good one. And I think you need to be willing to move laterally and take a short-term hit and pay. It's just the way it is. I wish it wasn't, but that's what it is. And each time I moved to my new startups, I always took a huge pay cut. In one of them, I didn't even take a salary; I just took equity. And that's the risk you have to take, because you're making a bet on the equity value of the company. So let me just leave here for a couple of reasons. I want to mention one thing here. There's two good books to talk about this topic. You know the second one, but the first one I'm going to mention is, and I get this from students at HBS and MIT all the time, like, I want to be a CEO, and I'll say, that's great, I think you should. But I want you to do this first. I want you to read this book, because this is the best book that describes the life of an early stage CEO. And Ben Horowitz does a masterful job. It's sort of autobiographical, but he also talks about how he invests in companies. So I ask the people that really want to do it, like, go read this book. And then after you've read the book, come back and tell me whether you still want to do it, because it's really hard. The tagline on this book, you don't actually have to read the book, although I do recommend it. The tagline of the book is, if you're the CEO and you have a problem, here's the truth. No one cares. You signed up for the CEO job. The problems are yours. You don't have anybody to complain to. You are on the spot. That's why CEOs make a lot of money. I know people complain about it. It's because it's a damn hard job. It's really hard. And so many people, basically can't do it or don't want to do it because it's so hard. So that's one book I recommend. Of course, the second is the book Trish and I wrote, Unlikely Entrepreneurs, and we profile 17 different entrepreneurs of their wins and losses. We talk also about companies that I've been involved with that have failed and the lessons that we've learned from those failures. So I think I'm going to stop there, Ben, and see if we can take some questions. I think why don't we do that? These are some of the entrepreneurs that are featured in the book.
Awesome. Thanks, Lou. Yeah, so we wanted to leave plenty of time for Q&As here to talk about specifics, because every person in this chat has a slightly different
any question is a good one.
Goals. Craig has a really good question to kick us off. He says, Lou, what are two personal traits that enabled your success in your journey from sales, in sales and also as a CEO? Are leaders born? Can they be created?
Sorry, who asked the question?
Traits that helped you develop, be successful in both of those roles and through the transition?
Who asked the question, Ben?
Craig Dobbs.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. Let's see. I think I'm writing this up right now for the Trinity commencement address. I think it's passion and compassion. I think you have to have passion for, especially in the case of startups, for joining a company that has no right to exist. A startup only earns its right to exist as it acquires customers. Even if you have a big bunch of money from a venture firm, it doesn't matter until you prove you can repeatedly and profitably acquire and keep and grow customers. You don't have, I think it's passion and a will to sort of break down barriers and see discomfort as a feature, not a bug, and get out of your comfort zone. I think that's the first one. And compassion, I think, is this notion of the empathy. You have to feel for other people, because your job is really both to recruit and retain, and then think about all your different constituents, right? You have to obviously sell to your customers, but you have to make sure your investors are getting a good return, that your employees are happy, that your board. I should talk about this, the board thing, because Greg, the hardest part of being a CEO for the first time is learning how to manage a board, because there's no training ground for that. Like you can move up to CEO from any of these functions, but there's no training ground for how do you manage board, manage the personalities of the board and what they're trying to do, whether they're a venture or a PE board member or an independent board member.
Man, that could be a whole other workshop.
I want to start a class on that here, but I'm too busy and having too much fun with sales. But the board management thing that's the hardest thing when you first get a CEO job. It's like, holy shit, what is this? I don't know how to do this. And you have to figure it out. And I'll tell you the tagline on it is, and the new president of Trinity is really good at this, is completely transparent as a CEO, and also realize that the board's trying to help you, even though it seems like they're criticizing you, which they probably are, and probably rightly so. But you have to learn how to use that sounding board as a way to get better.
Great. Okay, Adrian has another really good question. How do you build credibility to run some of those functions that you mentioned, to move out to marketing, customer success, general management, product? Some people it can be difficult to convince your management team that you're ready to make that move. How do
Okay,
you?
there's a couple things if you think about how a company operates. You have a board of directors. One thing I remember doing specifically when I first joined Avid was there were two venture investors, Bill Kaiser and Paul Mader from Greylock and Highland, who I knew I wanted to be a CEO after at some point in my career, and I knew I needed to network with these people and at least have them know who I was. So in other words, I guess the first and best way to do it, Adrian, is to be really good at the job you have. It's kind of like when we were recruiting in college. I didn't care what your major was. I really didn't care. Philosophy's fine. Were you better last semester than the previous one? And are you figuring out how to get better? So I didn't care if you're an econ major. I'd rather pick a history major who's figuring out how to get better. So if you're really good at your function, whether it's marketing, sales, CSM, your name will come up in a board meeting. It will. Because your CEO, if they're any good, is going to say, like, I got this guy Adrian over here. He's doing a great job. The investors will think about that. That's one way. So they'll have heard your name. So when you go off and want to do it, they'll be like, oh, I remember that guy. He was really good at XYZ. The other thing to do is within the company is develop, relationships across the different functions and show interest in what they're doing. If you don't really know the developers, go hang with them and learn about what they're doing. It's often I've learned a ton just hanging with the software development team as they sort of figured out how they're going to solve a tough problem. So I think going across the organization, and then you develop a relationship as a builder, as a person who is out for the team, not just for themselves.
Awesome. Okay. Um, so on that, actually, I have a question to build on these other functions. A question about product specifically.
Yep.
What did you learn about product in your when you took your general management role, when you worked as an EIR? What were some important lessons specifically about product that you didn't know previously in your sales roles?
Well, one of the things you find, Ben, in startups is what you think your product is valuable for. I'll take Avid as an example. What when you first saw the digital video editing of Avid, which was, cutting and pasting full motion video the same way we did it with word processing, it was like, oh my God, there's so many applications for it. There's broadcast, corporate video, TV commercials, long form programming, feature films. So the first thing to do is this is where you start to hone in on developing a sense for product market fit, a sense for what people are really using your product for. And I'll give you an example. In Japan, when I was over, before I moved over, we got an order from a karaoke producer called Topon Printing, and it was at the time it was a small order, it was like $100,000. The biggest order at Avid at that time had been a couple hundred grand, and then we got an opportunity to to compete for a big order, which was like a $700,000, which is the biggest order in Avid's history, and it was in Japan. And it was this printing company. And I just didn't know what they were trying to do. They were trying to mass produce karaoke videos, but it took me a couple nights in the bar and a legal pad and a pencil to figure it out by going out with the product people from our customer and our sales team from our distributor to figure it out. But I brought home an understanding of a use case to a developer who first said, oh yeah, it's going to take 3 months to do it. And then I told him this on a Friday, and on Sunday afternoon he called me and said, I've got it. Okay, so the point is that you learn what the customer is really trying to do. Even if you don't have a technical background, you can figure it out. And we got this huge order for Topon Printing, and it was still one of my favorite sales stories my whole career, because it took me a long time to figure out what they were trying to do. So I think on that product side is, your developers, and I'm not trying to diss developers here, but they'll often say, here, this is the best product, this is the best feature, and the customer should like it. That doesn't matter. It's what does the customer really want and like, and what are they going to use it for? And by the way, every startup, all 6 of mine, they all use the product in a different way than the original use case was designed. So it's your job to get out there and figure that out and bring it back to the product team. When you do that, to the product management team, to the engineering team, you develop a reputation as someone who can listen and understand the market.
Great question. Thank you. Okay, so we had a couple similar questions. Amy and Mark asked similar questions here. Is how do you avoid burnout? Or Mark said, how do you manage stress in the CEO role and create a culture So how do you avoid burnout and stress for yourself and then also for your team?
Yeah, I love that question. Yeah, so especially with Black Duck, which was a turnaround, I had some, I wasn't healthy for a little while when we were really at the bottom of the turnaround. Um, I think looking after your health is the most important thing, and getting support from your family. By the way, I could not have done any of these things without my wife and family. They're just amazingly supportive. I do think the most important thing is interesting. I've got this picture of Fusco here. Um, Harry Truman said when he was president, "You want a friend in Washington, get a dog." What did he mean by that? Well, when you're CEO, everybody has an angle at you. Everybody is asking you for something for their own interest. It's just the way it is. It's not bad. When I was, not a CEO and I was talking to my CEO, I was trying to angle for something, more money, a new promotion, a new job, whatever. It's just the way the world works. So you need to find somebody who's truly objective and will give you the closest thing to the truth that they can. And that's what an independent board member does. And for me, the, being a good independent board member where you're helping the CEO and team build the equity value of the company is the closest proxy to being a CEO. I work with, David Friend at Wasabi, Zach Marides at Teamworks, Kevin Frechette at Fair Market. I love those CEOs because they work with me to build their equity valuation. And I feel comfortable doing it. So that's what you need to do. That's who you need to help you. Because what can happen is they can help you say things to your investors that you are afraid to say yourself. Like if you really think your investor is full of it, you can't say that in a board meeting. You probably get bounced. And by the way, I know that because I did get bounced as a CEO. And I wish in that situation I had better intelligence on what the board was actually thinking about me before I got fired. And I learned the value of an independent board member. So they're the person that gives you the objective opinion. It's not your spouse. Your spouse is not objective. They just want you. They think you're getting the short end of something. No, it's not your spouse. Even though your spouse is great, you need an objective, independent board member, and they're so valuable.
Amazing. And now Alicia's question will piggyback off that. She asks, what are some practical steps to seek out an advisor um, or board? Although I'm not, she says advisor or board member role. So I actually don't know if she's asking like to
Yeah,
become an advisor
let
or
me
board.
distinguish between the two roles. You can be an advisor. I mean, I think there's some people on here, Halid, Jeff Gore, that have been sales coaches at HBS, and they've effectively become advisors to founders. Like they will call and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" So an
To
advisor
become
is
one of
is
for a
pretty
company.
easy to get because you are basically you have a specific skill, in your case sales, and you might be able to help them with their go-to-market strategy or their early sales. I think that's a good first step, and you're going to learn. Again, you're seeing the company from a different perspective, not from the perspective as a person just having to make quota and keep customers happy. The board position is different. You tend to get asked for those roles when you've been a successful CEO and have sort of sold your company, or even if it's not a great outcome, if you sold it. I have a former MIT student who was just a great woman who sold her company, and it wasn't a great exit, but it was an exit. And what you learn through that process enables you to become potentially a board member. But those jobs are usually you're asked to do those. You don't really go looking for them.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Thanks so much for the questions, everyone. I'm trying to get to all of them. Okay. So, oh, Brady has an interesting one. Um, a lot of companies are entering wartime around AI transformation. Do you have a different CEO style in wartime
Yeah, great,
versus?
Brady
Yeah.
Lenny. Yeah. Um, well, this is one of the reasons. I mean, obviously, I would like you guys, Trish and I would like you to read this book because these stories are all amazing. There's wartime CEOs stories in here. But the wartime CEO is what Horowitz talks about, and the hard thing about hard things is that, yes, it is. And what's interesting about that question is, I think people are usually fall into the category of being one or the other. Um, what it takes to keep a company alive when it has an existential threat is really different than when it's kind of sailing along. Um, So I think they're different skills, and I think the trick with you is whichever one you think you like the best is to line yourself up for those kinds of companies. But I do think the wartime CEO does help you to be, a really good CEO if you can survive it. It's tough. I mean, here's an example. So Trish and I were talking about this. Our biggest order for Unlikely Entrepreneurs is 150 books to HP Hood Company, which is a dairy company. And when we put our business plan together for this book, we thought, oh, it's going to be founders, venture capitalists, growth equity people, private equity people. Turns out to be a 180-year-old dairy company. What the hell's going on here? So I called the CEO of Hood, and I spoke in front of their management team, and he said, we're 180 years old. If we don't act entrepreneurial, we won't survive. And by the way, there's 33 million companies in America in total, from sole proprietorships to big companies like IBM. Less than 1,000 of them are 100 years old. So the benefit you get from living in the world's most dynamic economy is it's hard to make it to 100, much less 180. So what's interesting about that is these concepts work no matter how old your company is. And in fact, they keep you alive. Like, so Hood, just a couple of facts on this, Brady, is really interesting. You think of them as Hoodsies or cottage cheese or sour cream or milk. Their number one product is Lactaid. They're the biggest producer of Walmart's milk. They OEM milk to Walmart under their brand. And they Almond Breeze and oat milk are their products. Okay, so there's an example. The dairy farmer, basically makes the change to become, a company that can still grow in today's environment.
That's really, really tough. And how many did not make it over those 180 years?
But by the way, America's really good at this. You name a bunch of really world-beating European companies. There just aren't. They're mostly older companies. I'm not criticizing them. They're actually getting a little bit more entrepreneurial now because of sort of anti-U.S. sentiment right now. But we're good at this, but it makes it really hard because as an incumbent, you're constantly getting attacked by like the people we have in our book.
Yeah,
by
totally.
disruptors.
Totally. All right, cool. We have a couple other good questions. Here's one that's more on team management. And you mentioned that, step three is it's like all about the people in the team.
Yeah.
How do you handle executive leaders as a CEO? How do you handle executive leaders that are not aligned or that are having conflicts with each other?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, by the way, the best chapter to read in the book is this one with Fusco about leadership, and he describes it so succinctly what your job is as a leader. Because the reality is you can't afford to have all superstars. You just can't. You have to have role players. You have to have people that have all different kinds of skills. And your job as a leader is to find out where the best place is to put a person, where to move them. If you as the CEO make a mistake putting the wrong person in the job, you better fix it. I made that mistake a number of times because your high-performing team members, when they see you as a CEO bring in a weak member, they want to win, so they work around the weak person, but they're pissed at you for not fixing your own problem. So fix your problems, fix your hiring mistakes quickly. And the other thing is, what I learned, especially at Black Duck, is my first 2 times as CEO, I always had marketing and sales fighting with each other about, not enough leads are no good, all that stuff. What I found was the number one way to fix this was to hire someone in marketing who realized that in an early stage company, their job is not marketing, it's sales. If what they're working on is not driving sales, don't do it. So many marketing people want to talk about brand or big aspirational things that don't matter when you don't have a right to exist. And you really don't have a right to exist until you get to maybe 100 million in sales. So what I do is I change the comp plan for the marketing team and said, you're not getting comped on some metric that you made up that you say you achieved. You get comped on generating leads that the sales team closes. And I had a really good CMO, Bob Canaway, who agreed that that's how he and his whole team should be comped. And if the marketing people that didn't want to be comped that way, we said, go to another company. But you have to, that's how you eliminate eliminate the conflict, because if you don't do that, you as a CEO are just refereeing conflict all day long. And the conflict can be between CFO and any function. And by the way, some of the conflict between functions is natural and the friction is good. But if it becomes like more and more of your time as CEO is spent adjudicating these, being a referee, you got to fix it. And you can fix it with people, get the right people. You can fix it with comp. And by the way, just on that topic, if you do become a board member, my guess, I've been a board member many times. I've been on the audit committee, on the nominating and governance committee, but I always am on the comp committee. Get on the comp committee, figure out how people are getting paid. You're going to see where behaviors go based on being on the comp committee, and how the company thinks about paying people and what your goals are. And are you paying for the right things for the whole company to achieve those goals?
Mm. Always money in the banana stand, right? All right, a couple more questions here. And Lou has a class coming up in a little bit, so we're gonna let him out here shortly. But John and Alihan have a somewhat similar question, and I'll use Alihan's words. As someone early in their career in sales, what are some clear signals that they're on the path towards leadership roles versus just becoming a top contributor? And then John says, like, when a sales leader fails to make the transition to CEO, what are some common causes of that failure? So
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of two
Okay.
sides of the same
So
coin.
let me just,
Signals you're on the right track, failures, or reasons for failure.
okay, yeah, so let me just qualify my answer. First of all, there is nothing wrong with staying your whole career in sales and either being a great individual contributor or a great sales manager. That is a wonderful way to make a living, and I would never recommend not doing it. If you're good at it, it's a great life. I know a lot of people who've had, great financial and personal success with that. So that's why it's important to think about, do I want to take this next step? The first time I was CEO, my mentor said, careful what you wish for. Like, just be careful, because you're going to get it. You might not want it. So John, on that one, I'll give you an example of a CEO, a friend of mine who's a great salesperson, a great sales manager, went to be a first-time CEO. Actually, there's two of these people are ex-Avid people. First-time CEO, one of them ran out of money. He didn't understand how much cash he had in the bank. And the second one didn't understand product market fit. But both of them went and became CEOs after a number of other years a second time, and then had learned those really hard lessons and didn't make those mistakes again. In my case, the third time I was CEO when I was at Black Duck, I learned that you have to take forecasting like it's really serious. You can't get it wrong, because there's a number of ways you can get fired as a CEO. Usually it starts with losing the confidence of the board, but it can be just missing a couple quarters in a row. It could be a number of different things. So you have to have your antenna up to know what the board thinks of you. This is back to that role, the independent board member, because they will, if they're good, they will tell you the truth. So-and-so doesn't think you're doing this well. They may not tell you that because they don't like conflict or whatever, but you have to have that consigliere on your team telling you, reading the room for you. So I think it's understanding, and then that's why your team is so important, because the first one that I mentioned that ran out of cash, he just didn't have a good CFO. And the CFO didn't know they were out of cash. And then all of a sudden there was like, you're out of cash, the company's gone. It happens all the time. You'd be surprised. So whatever your weaknesses are, try and find a mentor or find a friend who can help you sort of backstop that weakness.
That's great. Yeah, Tyler actually had a similar question. What do strong sellers underestimate when moving from owning deals to owning the business? You said finance, what the board thinks of you. Anything else you would add there?
Well, I mean, really, it's the biggest thing is what your job is to raise the enterprise value of the company. It's about
Mhm.
the valuation of the company. And if you aren't raising the valuation, or if the board doesn't think you're on a path to raising the valuation for whatever reason, you haven't figured out product, you haven't figured out sales, whatever, they will replace you, or you'll be out of a job. So you have to know what the real reason is that they put you in there. And the other thing I would say is, it's unlikely, you always have to take a step down in company to take a step up in job function. So like for me, no one really wanted to be CEO of Reflectant Software, because the founder, Jason Lieblich, who's in the book, he's a tough character. He's a great technologist, but he's a hard person to work with. And no one else wanted that job. So, but I wanted to be a CEO, and I knew I could work through it. I knew he would be a good partner, as difficult as he was. So, you have to take a step down in company to take a step up in role.
Awesome. Okay. This might be our last question, and there's a
Yeah.
few that we're not quite getting to. I hope we've answered.
Yeah, if you
at
don't,
least
you just shoot them to me by email. I'd be happy to
Yeah,
answer. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, we'll send out. Lou's super available on LinkedIn and email. So Suprio asks about innovation specifically, and the CEO's role ultimately is decide like what we're building and
hmm
what not to build. And so if you don't come from a product or tech background, how do you hone your innovation sense? Let's call it that.
You got to spend time with the customers. Like every one of the three. But by the way, each of the times I became CEO, I tried to sell the product to the potential customers before I took the CEO job. You have to know if there really is demand in the market. It's not really about innovation, it's about product market fit. It is what the founder says is this great whiz bang technology, would it actually sell? You've got to get out there and pressure test it, because if you take the job before you know that yourself, you're stuck then trying to figure out how to sell something that's hard to sell. So you really have to know the market more than you have to know the technology. It's really about what use case is the customer looking to solve and what are their options. Trish and I talk about this in the book. There's another great book called Competing Against Luck about by Clayton Christensen, and he goes through this theory called the jobs to be done theory, which is like, what job is your product doing, and what are the substitute ways customers can do that? And you need to understand that the product you're presenting is going to do it better than what their substitutes are out there. Don't let any founder, technical founder, tell you there's no other substitutes. There's always substitutes for your product. There's always things, because you didn't have a right to exist, and the world was fine before you showed up. So I guess I would end, Ben, with just these people on this screen are all really inspiring stories, and you could learn a lot from their stories by picking up a copy of Unlikely Entrepreneurs. And if you don't like it, you can always use it as a doorstop.
Amazing. All right, let's wrap things up, Lou. Thank you so much, everybody. Last thing on Lou's front, we'll go to the next slide.
Yep.
Cool. So this year, if you're interested in going deeper on your company's sales, go-to-market, RevOps, reach out to Lou and talk about partnering on company retreats, sales kickoffs, workshops, advising.
Yeah,
I think
I love
yeah,
this. I love
doing
this
some
part.
work.
Like Ben, you're saying, like I learned the most, and Trish and I learned the most selling that 150 books to HP Hood. Like to me, it was so eye-opening. So if there's a way I can help you with your company, whatever the problem is, let me know.
Amazing. All right, with that, go have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, good luck with the rest of Q1 and hope to see you all in the C-suite soon. All right. Thank you all. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Christopher.
And Matt,
Yeah,
I'll see
thanks
you
for
at
joining
hockey
LinkedIn,
tonight.
Christopher. If anyone else wants to do that, feel free. Thanks, John. Jay, Trish. The poll ended. 31% were AE or BDRs. 24% head of sales, VPs. 16% managers, directors. We had 3 CROs and 6 CEOs.
Wow, that's
Should
great.
have had them up. Should have brought them up as panelists. Hey, Matt's coming to Chicago. I am in Chicago, Matt. You'd like to connect. Amazing. Thanks, guys. All right, I'm gonna end this
Thanks,
now.
Don.
Have a great day. I think it's just gonna end the